All right, guys, let's get started. Again, this is Michael Pink. I'm the CEO of SmartPM Technologies. I'm here with Rohit Sinha, who's also he's the CTO of SmartPM Technologies. We're doing a webcast today on the embedded experience with between SmartPM and Procore. This is essentially to show you how you can access SmartPM directly from the Procore platform and start using our system. Speakers today, which hopefully will get everybody on. The issue that I think everybody's dealing with is that most meetings online these days are difficult to get on. A lot of people are having multiple meetings right now. Kris from Procore, he hasn't yet logged in, but I don't want to keep everybody waiting. So we're just going to go ahead and get going on this, and hopefully when Kris joins on, we can cut to his slides and he can talk a little bit about the Procore's app marketplace and how they are working with companies like ours to bring the tools like ours to the Procore community in a simplistic manner. We want to talk a little bit about the Procore Partnership Program. This is what Kris was going to be talking about. If he's not here, we're gonna cut to the next section, which is a little bit about SmartPM. So what is SmartPM? How do you access SmartPM in Procore? We're going to show you a live demo of how you can just walk right into Procore, log in, load your schedules, turn it on, and then analyze them using SmartPM. After that, we want to show you what sort of analytics do you get from SmartPM. We have an hour today, but what we've decided we really want to do is also add a little bit at the end to talk a little bit about what's going on right now. COVID-19 is causing a little bit of mayhem out there in construction. Projects are stopping, supply chain issues are occurring. We've actually been contacted by several companies, some of which are clients, some of which are not clients, regarding how do you manage through this situation right now. We put together an action plan, and the action plan is more based on our expertise as consultants. You know, we the founders of SmartPM all came from the consulting industry. We help people in construction understand their data, manage through crises, manage through delays, manage through projects that had gone off the rails a little bit in an effective manner. So we have all these best practices that we can share. So we've produced an action plan that we've distributed out and will continue to distribute out about the things that you might want to start thinking about related to this situation, how to get ahead of it, how to identify the projects that you need to look at, how to understand the contracts and that sort of thing. So I do want to touch base on that as well. Well, Kris hasn't joined us yet, so we're just going to hop right into a little bit about SmartPM. Somebody did just ask a question if this program will be available later. Yes, we are going to be recording this, and we are going to be putting it on our site, and also be sending out a link to all the attendees as well as the people who are unable to make it to this today who had actually signed up. I'm going to cut through this Procore section until Kris joins on, but I'll start with a little bit about what is SmartPM. Before I get there, I will tell you we started a relationship with Procore last fall, where we had synced in our product to theirs such that their data that's loaded into Procore, the schedule data being that primary data set that we study, is accessible via SmartPM, and that the users who are logging into Procore and who sign up to SmartPM through the Procore app marketplace can actually just log into our site as well as open up our technology directly into the Procore platform. And it's been a very successful partnership thus far. We've worked well together. We've got a lot of happy clients that have come from the Procore community. So this has been a good thing. But really, what is SmartPM is question. We are a schedule analytics technology. We were built by people who essentially got hired on projects, pretty much all over the world of different sizes and shapes, to understand data and make sense of it. And the primary data set that we focus on here with SmartPM and the SmartPM technology is the schedule. The reason we focus on the schedule is because, to me, a guy who's spent a lot of time studying projects, whether it was forensically, whether it was midstream, or even at the get-go, saw that the schedule was a very important, useful document and data set that, if understood, would help people make better decisions. Delays are things that were argued about, that we got called in to help study, and that's a difficult process and almost very time consuming, very costly process to understand delays. And it's also the centerpiece of many arguments. But really the point about the schedule that's most important is, and why it's such a good data set, is because it's really the only set of data that connects every part and piece of the project into a cogent plan. If you think about it, most data is disconnected. Accounting information for some trades is different from others, and it's disconnected, so you can't really understand how everything functions together. And all of that's laid out in the schedule. So as a person who studied projects the way that I did over the many years that I did, the schedule continued to be that source of understanding when people were trying to understand what impact did this cause to what milestones or what trades or what delays. It's very difficult to understand that unless you're looking at it in the world of a schedule and studying it in what I call a schedule-centric model. So that is why we focus on the schedule, and we do it in a fairly very robust way, but we bring it to a level that is intuitive, that is usable by people who haven't necessarily spent their careers studying schedules and whatnot. So I pride us on simplifying this very complicated, somewhat arguable process that we see out there. The way in which our product works is you essentially take the schedule data, the files, the XCR files and the MPP files, and you load them in, and you load them into the program, and it eventually crunches these numbers, runs these analytics. The things that we look at are quality, project performance, delay analysis. We do a very great forensic delay analysis, one that is, better than anything I've ever seen, anything that I've ever done manually. We look at schedule modifications. We do project and milestone completion forecasts, using historical progress data to predict future outcomes, studying weather, looking at earned value, always looking at compression and feasibility. One of the unique aspects of our program is that we do a cumulative and iterative analysis, meaning that, generally projects have schedules that are loaded on a monthly basis. Usually most programs are able to look at one schedule versus another. We're able to look at every single schedule in the same database, one after the next, and then I call that iteratively, and then cumulatively, all of this information in one cumulative bucket to look at for predictions down the road. One thing I do want to say is Kris has joined. I do want him to hop on, and I can continue this slide in a little bit. I want to show you a little bit of some of the bells and whistles on this program, but I want to let Kris hop in because I want him to talk about this Procore's partnership program. Kris, welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. Everybody had some technical challenges there, as I think some folks are working through these days as well as us. So I apologize for that. But thanks, Michael. Thanks. I really appreciate the introduction, and we're really excited for the stuff that SmartPM is doing, and really excited for the partnership that we have together. As some of you may know, if you're not super familiar with Procore, or maybe if you are, you're really familiar with this message, but really our goal is to connect everyone in construction really on a global platform. And that means being able to connect different stakeholders, different technologies, and different people so that we can build the world around us. And without that connection, it becomes extremely difficult. And things like, just like today we're on a WebEx, right? Being able to interact and work well together. It's so important that all of those workflows are kind of streamlined together. Our industry's been transitioning for quite some time from a kind of an analog world with paper and pencil and clipboards and the spreadsheets to a more modern digital world. No better example than what's happening in the construction space right now about in the use of internet and mobile and cloud-based software as well. But as we move into the future, what we really need to focus on is a lot of the insights that we can gain from that data. I know Michael kind of started with his pitch around what SmartPM is doing, and they're really leveraging that data that's collected in the field and built into schedules to do additional analytics and drive additional insights and additional business decisions on top of that. Michael, you can go ahead and flip to the next slide. So what's really scary is today, so much of that data actually goes unused, right? We're not leveraging that information. We're not taking it and doing anything with it. And schedules have become something that is a rear-looking document of kind of what happened on the job many times and not about how we can move forward. So I think it's so important that we're leveraging this data, especially all that schedule data, all of that project management data, all of that field information, to really drive our decisions on how we can complete on time or faster, right? How we can eliminate delays, how we can identify delays when they happen early so that they have a smaller impact on the project. Go ahead, Michael, to the next slide. So with the problem with this has always been there's just such a disconnect between the different stakeholders and the different technologies that we're all using. And even sometimes within a company, those technologies are siloed. You have great point solutions, but they're not sharing information in between them. And what we really need to do is we need to connect those things. We need to make that data flow between systems. You can go to the next slide, Michael. And what this does by not being connected is it leads to poor communication and collaboration. And that communication and collaboration can be between different companies. It can be between different employees at the same company. It can be different software solutions, right? And this leads to costly rework and decreased productivity and a lot of time spent on double entry instead of really focusing on what we should be focusing on, which is what can we do to improve this project? What can we do to improve our deliverables? What can we do to stay on track, right? And when people are forced to do that double entry and work in systems that don't work together, it's very frustrating, right? So that affects employee retention. And when you have a company that's well integrated, you can see that employee attraction is much better. You're bringing in people inside the organization because you have a great process and you have great tools and a great tech stack put in place. Go ahead, Michael, to the next one. So our goal is really connecting all of the people, all the systems, and all the data to really improve those project outcomes. And that's why we have such a strong platform. That's why we have such amazing partners that we work with. So you can go to the next slide, Michael. Our platform is really built as the basis to connect everyone in construction. Whether you're an engineer, an owner, a contractor, a specialty contractor, you have needs to get to a lot of that information and data. And we do that by building the pieces that are underneath it that tie into solutions that you use every day, like our construction management platform. And Michael, if you flip to that next one, we'll talk a little about some of those things. So we have kind of four main product groups, if you will. Our pre-construction tools for bidding and pre-qualification, project management. It's exactly what you think it is. All the traditional things that we do on a job site, RFIs, submittals, schedule, data and information, and including BIM and 3D coordination. We then have tools for field productivity and equipment management, and then we have our financial side of the business. But really, we know that we can't deliver every single solution and solve every single problem that you have inside of your organization. And that's why we at the foundation of all that is a Procore platform and reporting that is really enhanced by all of our partners. And that's what's so exciting about like the partnerships with SmartPM is, yes, we have a tool that makes it easy for you to visualize your schedule in the field so that you don't have to have a P6 license for everyone. You don't have to have expert knowledge on how to open up files and go to the right version and get to the things you need. But we're not looking at the high-end analytics of that. We are not necessarily running analysis on it and identifying the potential gaps in your schedule, the delays that could be happening, and the compression of that schedule. And that's why we partner with companies like SmartPM, is because they do that so well, right? But we don't want you to have to load your schedule in 5 different places. We want you to load your schedule in one place. So the beauty of that is we've integrated into the scheduling solutions, we've integrated into these partners that provide enhanced analytics, and you put your schedule in one place, it propagates through all of those systems, and then you get all the additional value of working with both our system and our partner systems all at the same time. Go ahead, Michael. So we really do believe ourselves that we are more than just a platform. We really are a partner. That's why we do enjoy so much with partnering with folks and really bringing those solutions together for our customers, because we know that everyone's different and that we can really deliver for our customers on the workflows that they find to be important for their businesses. You can flip to the next one. And so that's why we're super excited about SmartPM, and I think this is about where Michael was chatting through about some of the things that they do, and we're really excited about this partnership, really excited about the relationship. They as a team have been super fantastic to work with. We love the integration that they've built today and are really excited about some of the things that we're going to be able to do in the future to continue to enhance this as well. So I'll turn it back over to Michael.
Thanks, Kris. Thank you very much. And I couldn't echo more of how important it is that data is essentially brought into a place and made available to multiple parties. You know, coming from the world of forensic analytics, I mean, that's really where I started and where I got my understanding of how to take construction data that you weren't part of and reconstruct it in a manner that speaks. Having done that for so long, understanding, being in the rooms with the people who are trying to interpret it themselves, trying to understand it their own way, trying to look at it and come to some terms both internally and with the parties that they're working with, I found that that disconnect is one of the major causes of the arguments and the disputes. Most people don't have the time to collect all the data, organize it effectively, nor do they want to pay, you know, a lot of money for a person to do it. Which leaves everybody kind of sitting there trying to do the best they can with the data that they have to discuss large volume issues, large dollar volume issues, sorry, which ultimately gets to a point where arguments occur. And that disconnect, to me, you know, is one of the biggest issues in all of the industry, is one of the reasons that a lot of projects end up in dispute. So that really is one of our missions, is to get this data at a level that everybody can understand it, and Procore's mission is to make sure that all the parties have access to it. All of this is a recipe to me for getting people on the same page, getting better decisions made, having less arguments, and more working together and collaborating to get that common goal. And that's get the job done, get it done on time if you can, don't argue over money, and let's move on to the next one, you know, with a great relationship. And that's really, I would say, what our mission is to help here, because I was looking at the industry as an industrial engineer wondering, why is everybody fighting so much if this data's all around? And it's tools like this, it's tools like Procore that are going to allow this to happen, this next major movement of insight, as Kris was alluding to before. I'll finish up, want to show you a couple more you know, screenshots. I'll be quick here because we've got about 40 minutes. I really want to get back to that action plan. I do also want to show you how the connection works. So really quick, we load schedules. We've got 4 levels of analytics that can be shared or monitored. We've got a program level dashboard that allows you to see some pretty good analytics at a high level across your portfolio. This is really designed to stop any sort of analysis paralysis on where to focus your efforts. This is a great place for you to, you know, constantly be monitoring to see if there's any red flags getting thrown up around the schedule issues, like quality, like delay, like recovery, like compression, looking at the end date and predicting whether or not that's an accurate end date, and if not, what is, looking at some earned value metrics. This is the first level. The next level would be the the project dashboard. This is where you can actually click on one of these, open it up, and start to really dig into some of these analytics and understand, you know, iteratively and cumulatively what's going on this job and what does that mean about risk or, you know, schedule delays or compression or changes. Or the other thing that's really cool about our program is we can cut and slice the schedule up into different parts and pieces instead of just one overall plan. And looking at that and understanding delays to the end date, you can actually look at every milestone in its own isolated world, or every subcontractor in its own isolated world. So these are very powerful things that I couldn't even do as a consultant that we've built into this tool. One other layer that we have here is the auto-generated report. Now, we, the people who founded this company, had spent a lot of time putting these types of reports together. This is a report that should be, you know, printed out monthly and brought to your OAC meetings to really talk schedule at a level that everybody can understand. We've, you know, some of this is customizable. Some of these scoring models are customizable, but we'll get into that in a minute. But before I do that, I do want to share this with our CTO, Rohit. He will be the guy who's going to be guiding you through this this connection in Procore. I'm going to switch the screen right over to Rohit. Rohit, let me know when you have it, and we'll go from there.
All righty. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so we talked to Procore, as Mike said, last year fall, and one of our goals was about integrating, and one of our goals with this integration was to make it as simple as possible for really anyone to come in and without a whole lot of configuration or anything of that sort, be able to quickly get their data that they already have stored in Procore over into SmartPM so that they can analyze it. So we set off on building an integration. It's available in the Procore marketplace. So if you're inside of Procore, you're able to easily go into their marketplace and just search for SmartPM. Once you search for SmartPM, you'll be able to install it. This integration itself, it's already installed in this company. The integration itself does not actually have any configuration that you have to do on the Procore side. Once you have it installed and added to your different projects, you're able to just go into the project itself, select the application, and it'll go ahead and launch into SmartPM. Now, what this will do is this will actually authenticate you in SmartPM using your Procore credentials. So you don't have to worry about having a separate login or anything like that. You're able to just go ahead and go into it in SmartPM. Now, based on the project that you are in, it'll actually pull up in SmartPM. If the project already existed, it would take you into it. It would check if you have any new schedule updates. As Mike mentioned, these schedules are typically updated monthly, and every month when you got your new schedule in, you'd go ahead and upload it into Procore, and this actual integration would check to see, hey, are there any new files? But in this case, this is a new project that I'm bringing over to Procore for the first time, so you get the option to either link it to an existing project if you're managing this inside of SmartPM beforehand, or just import it over as a new project. We'll go ahead and import this in, and you hit continue. Now what this is doing is this is going through your Procore and seeing what all files are there, right? So in this case, you can see that there were 4 files that were loaded into Procore, and it pulled them over, it validated them against our criteria, and then brought over things like the project name, that it's a Primavera project, and then gives you the option to put in a postal code. If you have this information configured in Procore, it'd bring it all over. So we'll go ahead and put in a zip code here in Atlanta, and then hit import. Now what this is doing is this is actually bringing over all your files from Procore and building a project inside of SmartPM so that it can be analyzed. Now, you can continue to access this through the Procore interface, through the embedded experience, but you also have the capability of looking at this data in SmartPM itself. You're able to just go to live.smartpmtech.com and log in with a second set of credentials, or actually log in with single sign-on with Procore. Once this project has imported, it'll actually this window will close and it'll take you into that project itself. And let's see. While that's happening, this is the first stages of our integration where we've brought over those files from Procore, the schedule files. And as we progress this integration, we plan on bringing over more and more data that's already stored in Procore. We plan on bringing over the cost data and all that other information so that you can analyze all of that collectively and really look at all of the data together that's been previously disjointed inside of SmartPM. So.
Other documentation in the future, and I'll get into this when we jump into the product. We're also going to be bringing over correspondence. You know, we talk about taking schedules, understanding that systematic approach to analyzing a job, and then throwing on things like photos, throwing on things like costs, throwing things on daily reports and correspondence. What that ends up doing is it builds a very robust analytical system that allows you to cut and slice the analytics any way you want. It also builds what's called a very complete, more complete than I've ever seen, as-built schedule and documentation portal that's assigned the way that it needs to be studied. Rohit, looks like it's been loaded.
Yep. Yeah, so this project's been imported over into Procore. And one thing I wanted to mention real quick is the zip code. Mike mentioned on his the different analyses that we offer. One of them is a weather analysis. So we use the zip code in order to actually locate the weather station that's closest to your project so that we can give you up-to-date information about what the weather was according to NOAA at that point in time. So all that information is accessible, and we can actually build out a full weather analysis for you, saying that given your different contractual terms in terms of how much rain is considered no work, or what temperatures can you work in, we can actually tell you on average for the last 5, 10, 15, however many years it is in your contract, what should be your weather days. So now this project has come over into SmartPM, and it takes you straight into the project dashboard. Now, whenever you launch this application from inside of Procore, you'll come directly to this, unless there are new schedules to import, in which case you'll see a similar screen to the prior screen, allowing you to bring those schedules over. So once it's imported in, Mike's going to talk a little bit more about the analysis, as well as some of the things specifically around COVID-19.
Yeah, let me get that screen back right here.
Yep. I'll turn it back. Yep.
I'm going to show my main screen. Rohit, do you see us logged in here? Yes, I think we do. All right, so here's basically what the dashboard would look like when you logged in. If you had several projects that you had imported into SmartPM, you would see them all here on this dashboard. As I mentioned before, this dashboard is about getting a lay of the land, really, looking at your projects all sort of in a consistent way. You know, things that we look at, as I had mentioned, first and foremost is schedule quality. Quality is not, did you build this thing the way that it should be constructed? No, this is about, does the schedule have a level of integrity built in and structured well to effectively manage a project like this? So we're talking things about, you know, enough logic, you know, following best practices like not having too many constraints, not having too many start to start or finish to finish, not having too many high duration activities. You know, we call this the DCMA methodology for schedule quality. This is something that other tools have. I would say ours is a little bit more intuitive because it comes with a customizable grading structure. So this is actually a grading structure that we built in, but you can also customize it yourself. So if you see things that you believe in from a risk threshold that and other things that you're not necessarily thinking are a problem, like resource loaded activities, you can structure your own scoring structure such that systematically your firm will follow those rules that you set forth and have a grade to align with it. One thing that we've been asked by customers and we provide is the ability to not put a grade on. It'll just be red, yellow, green. Some people don't like to see a grade, and that's okay. We will turn it off, and we have a setting to be able to turn it off. As you go across the line, we're always showing you at that latest schedule import date, what was the planned progress, what's the actual. Then we go across and we start to track delay. We're tracking true critical path delay here. This is how many days the end date would have suffered had there been no changes to the schedule. This is how many days of critical path delay had occurred. We're also looking at, you know, what's that end date variance? That most recent schedule's end date's only so many days later than the baseline. Right here it says it's 87. So if there's been 247 days of delay, I'm sorry, it's 83. If there's been 247 days of delay and the end date's moved out 83 days, then we know that there's been some recovery built into the future, and we track that as well. We then quantify it in terms of compression. Compression being how stacked is this schedule getting? If the end date's not moving as much, or if things aren't getting done, even though they should be getting done, how much stacking are we having towards the end of the job? And the last piece of information we have here is a comparative predictive end date. So right here, here's an example of a situation where the end date says it's supposed to be May 1st. That's what the most recent schedule shows. But if you extrapolate performance history to date on the future schedule, we're actually looking more at an August date. So this is another mechanism for questioning whether or not, or understanding whether or not the go forward plan is representative of history. And if history is extrapolated on the future, if the current end date aligns with the predicted based on performance to date. So really, it's a lot of good information to get a lay of the land. It's a lot of good information to determine, do I need to take a closer look? And that's really what we do next, is we open it up into this next level. This is our project dashboard. So really, this is where it starts to turn into analytics that you can use and discuss. First and foremost, as you want to get a lay of the land of the schedules that are in here, the data dates, the planned progress, the actual. You can start to compare. When did they start losing progress? How many activities have been added? We see pull planning schedules all the time. So different points in time, you'll see the number of activities double. We want to know those points in time. We want to understand what those changes were. So we also want to give you a roadmap to determining where to look. Next level here, this is really about explaining these analytics. Again, this is the project that we loaded from Procore. Here's a summary. Here's a summary that talks about the grade over time. Did it get better? Did it get worse? How did delays start to mount? The first update, there was 1 day of delay. Then there was another, 15. And then the last update looks like we had another 25. So that's really giving us an understanding of that. And we also want to track that into how many days are being recovered periodically. And on top of that, we want to start tracking how compressed is the schedule getting. This usually gives you a lay of the land of how useful is this data? What are some of the high level decisions? Is this project getting into a risky state for any of these, as it relates to any of these metrics, and really give you an understanding of that process. But getting into each of these metrics is the next step. So this is our trend report, but understanding what is a B, why did I get a B, why did I get a B plus? On my schedule quality, we can take a quick look here, and we, in a systematic way, start to show you, all your schedules starting from the beginning. What were the issues that impacted that grade? These are what we track. We track things like whether or not it's resource loaded, that could be turned on or turned off. We track things like missing logic. Are there activities that don't have a predecessor or a successor? We track high float. How many activities have over 44 days of float, which is 2 months? You can change that to 10 days of float. You can change that to 100 days of float. But really, what this tells me right here is that there's a lot of high float, which may mean that there's some logic missing here. There may be some crew logic missing, and or this may all self-correct when I fix this missing logic item. If I go back in, put logic into all the activities that are missing, if I want to know which activities those are, I can click right here, and it will open up into our Gantt chart view, and it'll just list those activities, the ones that are missing logic, so that you can determine if this is an issue that needs to be fixed today. So all these activities right here are missing logic. Looks like some of them are, a lot of them are milestones, which we need to probably double check to make sure that those are just milestones that are hanging out there and not driving other trades. But we also want to make sure that there's nothing in the construction trades that are actually really impacting. But for the most part, it looks like a lot of this is milestones. I would double check that. I'd make sure that those milestones predecessors aren't just driving that milestone. But this is really about informing you if you have any risks as to how well the schedule has been structured. Moving on into the delay piece, this is, to me, near and dear to my heart. I've spent many a day doing a forensic delay analysis and many a months or years doing it as well. We figured out a way to have a program do this the way that a human should be able to do this in a much, much quicker manner. But really what we want to show over time, each update, this is called a Windows style analysis, where each update is telling you a story about the past, and it's documenting issues that you need to understand. Starting with, did the end date slip? And second, was there delay? Critical path delay, and was there realized critical path recovery? In this example, we'll see that there was 18 days of delay, and there was 3 days of actual recovery that was done by out of sequence work. We want to know that. We want to know, did the contractor see the delay and do something? And contractors need to be able to show that as well, and it's really hard to do that. Here we're able to see that, you know, in some cases we have some recoveries here and some delays as well. In this case down here, again, we'll see what delayed the job in that period and what sort of recoveries were made. And we can see that both digitally as well as, you know, in a tabular format. We can go right back to our program here, and it will create a window for that period of time that really shows you in that period what were your delays, what were your recoveries, and to the extent of your project, so that such that you can start talking about these issues that were going on as you were you know, working in that period. As you can see, there's this historical critical path that shows up. Another thing that's really cool to me is the fact that you can actually open up your entire schedule in SmartPM and see that historical critical path. This is what is actually very important to understanding, you know, what was driving the job at different points. If there's ever any question about delays and recovery, you need to know what that historical critical path was. We tell you what it was, and we do that in a very cool way. We actually create, you know, updates periodically throughout each period to understand, you know, at different points in time where their critical path shifts and whatnot based on the progress that was being made. Going into the next level, I also want to talk about another thing. You know, when you see periods of time where there are delays and that the end date's not shifting out as much. In this example right here, we see that between period 1 and period 2, the end date moved up a month, 32 days sooner. If you were to look at that, you know, sitting in a meeting, you'd say, awesome, we did great last month. But what this data is telling me is, no, actually there was some delays. There was just a lot of recovery put in. 47 days of recovery on top of 15 days of delay equals 32 days of variance, negative 32 days of variance to that end date. So I'll say that again, the end date should have kicked out 15 days, but instead it moved up 32, which means 42 days of recovery were made. Now, that's great. I hope that there's a really good mitigation plan coming together here, but we got to double check that. We need to understand the changes, and we need to make sure that they're not overly aggressive, overly optimistic. So what we allow you to do here is actually look at that in a much more structured manner of what were the changes in this period. How were they critical path changes? Were they near critical path changes? Did they impact, were they activity changes, logic changes, duration changes? There was 109 of them in that period, and I want to know which ones affected the critical path. So the first thing I can do is just look at critical changes. And this lists, you know, all the changes, the type of change, and what the decision was made, activity name changes, logic changes, most importantly, constraint changes and duration changes. I can see that I'm starting to see a story where durations are getting shortened a little bit here. If I want to look at that closer, I can go back to my table and say, okay, I want to look at all duration changes and see which ones affected the critical path. And right here, I can go down the line and see that there's a lot of steel activity getting shortened, and they're affecting the critical path. This red lines right here tell me that these were changes that were made that if they weren't made, the critical path would have been elongated. And this is the same thing, but for the near critical path. So this starts to give the user the ability to take a double check. You know, that's one of the things that I noticed in the industry that's a challenge is project controls teams to keep up with the decisions that are being made at the site. You know, a lot of issues happen in construction, a lot of impacts occur. You know, everybody's always needing to change direction real quick, put out fires, make decisions. Sometimes that can get a little over optimistic, and that over optimism usually results in compression and ultimately maybe even misleading the critical path. And that's really where schedules start to die, is when the critical path is off, it's over compressed, and the end date's not achievable, and nobody knows it. So this is a control for that. The other thing that we like to do is be able to bring it to a level that everybody understands. This is our pink report that we talked about. In this case, we have activity codes. You can organize it by WBS or activity codes, but right here, I'm just going to show you real quick that you know, I'm going to sort it out by area, and this is your report that you can bring to a meeting after every update. And I'm going to pop it open. I'm going to show you. Here's your cliff notes of why the schedule got a B+, what some of the issues were. Here's a summary level version of your schedule organized the way that you want, that shows you how things are structured, where the critical path is, and generally a manner that the brain can digest. It's not that 40-pager, it's a 2 or 3-pager that people can look at and who understand construction and really digest what this is telling us. That's another issue we saw out there in the industry is, nobody can really take a 40-page schedule and make any sense of it. We're trying to take that process and make it much easier. We also put that delay table in here, always iteratively updating with every new schedule. And we also give you those critical changes such that in your meeting, you can have a quick discussion about whether or not these critical changes, the ones that are shortening that critical path or extending that critical path or modifying that critical path, are actually being discussed, feasible, everybody's bought into it. And that's really, to me, these 4 things are the things that should be talked about at every update, at every period. And all parties need to be discussing them. The subs need to be understanding them, the GC needs to be understanding them, as well as the owner. And that really goes back to Chris's point, connecting everybody. I will talk a little bit about scenarios and scenario conditions, but I do want to get back to this slide deck real quick and show you some of the recommendations that we have. But this allows us to decide, what schedules we want to take a look at. You can compare 2 or 3. You can re-baseline it if you'd like to remove the first 2 because everything changed. You can pick and choose which schedules to use. You can also determine if you want to look at the full schedule or if you want to track to a specific milestone or activity, meaning like a subcontractor's completion activity. This will actually create a sub-network of analysis that will just take that milestone and do a reverse iteration through the schedule and grab any and all activities that have some sort of logic tied to that milestone and run the same analysis. So you're able to actually, put in things to track concrete completion or make changes to the future or make changes to the data historically and rerun. In this case, I will show you in a minute, but we've got some issues in the schedule that needed to be addressed from an earlier stop period due to the coronavirus. This is a project that we wanted to show you, and I'll that'll be my segue into some of these slides just so I can wrap it up. But the corona effect right now, we're looking at this as, potentially a challenging issue in the industry. I'm very hopeful that there won't be as many shutdowns as they're talking about. I'm hopeful that these supply chain issues aren't going to be crippling. But we are seeing sites getting shut down. We are seeing workforce numbers going down. We are predicting that there's going to be some cash flow issues. We definitely believe that, for at least a couple-month period, there'll be some discussions about delays, some requests for time extension, probably some builder's risk claims, and maybe even some contractor defaults. I don't want to assume that mayhem's going to happen, but given my experience, I can tell you that at least in some of these major cities or on some of these larger projects, we should be expecting these things. We have been contacted over the last few days by many people asking questions about what do you do right now? We know that sites are getting shut down. We know that people are thinking about what's next. All we can really offer is some ideas on how to prepare. What we've, given our experience out there, we put ourselves in the shoes of owners and contractors, which is really what we do as consultants, is to look at that situation from the client's perspective, sit down and think about what do we need to do right now. And really what came to mind for me, if I was working with any of my clients as a consultant, would be the first thing we got to do is figure out the high-risk projects. Which ones are going to be impacted. You've got to lay the land of probably the projects that you're responsible for or that your company's managing right now. There's high-risk projects and there's probably some low-risk projects. We're hopeful that this will cool down in about a month, and a lot of the projects that aren't too large or in major cities that are being impacted by this virus are not going to be very much impacted, hopefully. So for that reason, it's important to start isolating out which ones do we really think are at risk right now. And then really that's where you should be spending your time. You don't want to be getting a lay of the land of all the projects that don't matter. You want to really start to focus on the ones that do. And I would say right now, start thinking about the bigger projects and the ones that are near major cities. Once you get that list down, you can, and I'll explain how to do that shortly, but you can then start to study the contracts. You know, there's various clauses in the contracts that we should be aware of. Force majeure, I'm sure everybody is well aware of. You know, most contracts I've seen don't really cover this type of thing, but I'm hearing from a lot of others that there's certain verbiage in there that really does cover this. But really understanding what that means to your various jobs, it could be different on certain jobs. Looking at force majeure clauses, looking at time extension requirements, always making sure that you have a process for actually analyzing it and understanding it. And if you don't have, if it's not cut and dry in the contract, we then have to start thinking about insurance and how to manage that. After you go through that process, next thing I would say is necessary is to make sure that you have a good understanding of the project at the time of the impact, not after. At the time of the impact. We have to make sure for all of our high and medium risk projects that we feel good about the schedule, that the schedule's not overly compressed. It's not, there hasn't been a ton of delays that have been consumed and the end date's completely compressed, because what we'll find happen then is a very arguable critical path and plan going forward on a very arguable end date that wouldn't have been achievable anyway. And that is not the right way to start this process. I would say the right way to start this process is to go back out to your jobs that you identify here and make sure that you believe that the project's been statused correctly, the data is accurate, accurately reflecting reality. Make sure that you believe that the end date's achievable. Make sure that you don't believe that the schedule is too compressed right now, and that the other thing you want to make sure is that the schedule quality and logic is complete. I see a lot of projects these days that, schedule looks pretty, it's just disconnected and the critical path is off, and that is the last thing we need. Other things that I see as a big risk here is if you're putting in a lot of finish constraint milestones to be able to track different things, all that negative float is just going to be very, very confusing for you, as well as the people you're trying to explain delays to. So those are a lot of things that you can do there. And again, guys, we will be sending out this action plan. It's an action plan that's really designed to cover these things. The last piece of that, and this really falls into my wheelhouse, is delay monitoring and analysis going forward. This is a time where we all need to just start looking at projects, looking at delays, doing it the right way, being honest on a regular basis, sitting in the meetings with our counterparts and really talking about the issues, making sure that everybody's on board of how to handle it from a contractual standpoint. Again, I will send out a much more meaningful document that really explains a lot more about the steps required in each one of these, but I did want to cover that because there is a process. I think that these things can be done, rather simply, even from your home. Somebody can take the bull by the horns and start creating some risk matrices for the projects, and then start studying the contract clauses and making sure that we have a plan for each high-risk project. Then making sure that the project's set up for success from a scheduling perspective. This may involve getting some project controls people involved and maybe even looking at some photos just to make sure that this schedule's been statused properly, that we believe it's ready to go for the future, that it's not overly compressed, that it's essentially re-baselined if necessary. And then putting this delay monitoring and analysis plan into place and delivering that plan to your counterparts. What I do want to, yes.
Michael, I was just going to chime in there for a second. And I think that the document, I've seen the document that Michael's going to send over is awesome. It's coming from a former project manager back in the day. So please take a look at that. I think it'll have a lot of great info in there. One thing I wanted to stress is, as we often have to think about like owners and GCs and specialty contractors, everyone, all of those stakeholders are disrupted by this, right? And I think the best outcome that any project can hope for is just a clearer understanding of, can we still get the project done? Can we do this without, and what is it going to cost us, right? If everybody comes and sits around the table together and looks at this information as a group, or sits around virtually and looks at this information as a group, as it may be for the near future, I think that's really super important, right? It should not be number one, let's go build a claim. It should be communication and collaboration on how we can still get to our end goal, which in many cases it's delivering a project or a building. And I think that's at times like now, it's where we need to pull together and really enhance the level of collaboration that we have with our partners and with our team members on these projects.
Yeah, and actually I'll echo that. I guess one of the things that I'm thinking that everybody should probably think through right now is that pretty much everybody on at least some of these projects, all parties are going to be impacted in some way, shape, or form, and to be cognizant of that. You know, owners aren't going to be receiving their assets as quickly as they expected, which will impact the business that it was going to be representing for them anyway. That will impact their revenue. Contractors are floating all this right now. You know, while we're sitting here, projects are stopped. Contractors are, you know, paying for the people to be waiting, and that money's going to rack up. And the more contractors that are out there, you know, on more projects doing that is a big risk for them. And then simultaneously, you know, I think once subcontractors are dealing with that to a point, but at the same time, once this industry starts moving again, you know, everybody's going to want to go quick. Everybody's going to want their project back on track. And I believe subcontractors are going to be pulled sideways, which is more the reason to make sure that there is a plan, that we understand the schedule is reflective of reality, and that we understand what's sort of happening to everybody else's organization right now. And that's really, you know, a recipe to me to stay out of court. And I think that that's probably one of the most important things that everybody needs to think about right now. There's no benefit arguing this to court. Everybody's being impacted. Now we just need to get on the same page. And there's ways to do that. One thing I did want to show you that we are actively working on with some of our customers are building these, we call them fragnets, and incorporating these fragnets into the schedules. You know, some clients, and this is an example, if I open this schedule up, you know, you'll see some of the changes that we put in on this last update were some of these changes that we put into this last update. You'll see that you know, there's some fragnets that have been put in here, factory shutdown notification. So this particular schedule, you know, we've got a hypothetical factory shutdown in China. China's factory shutdown in January, and you know, that was not understood to them at the time at what sort of impact that would have. But today we do know what happened. If we open this up and we take a quick look, we'll figure out that, you know, if we look at this from the perspective of the schedule before that impact, with the logic that was contained within, we see that, you know, here's where our critical path was going through this southeast building. It looks like that there was some submittal review issues going on. But when we put those fragnets in, and I'm going to just do a quick search for them so you can see that they're in here, we see that there's some fragnets here for that shutdown, and you see that that's not highlighted as critical. Well, it's not highlighted as critical because it was only put in the most recent update. And you don't want to go back in time and start changing schedules and doing hypothetical changes to whatever, because that usually is a grounds for argument. So instead, what we're able to do with our program is create a rule. We take that fragnet change that we put in here, and we took that old date that it was added on that most recent update, and we said, you know what, put it in the schedule as if it was happening in real time. Go put it in the previous schedule and rerun the analysis. And what we're able to see when we do that is the true impact. We're able to go back to our fragnet that had that steel fabrication issue in it. We're able to then go look at our delay table, and you'll see that in that period now, that factory shutdown has become critical, and it's delayed the job for a certain number of days. Now, this is, to me, the real way to do one of these things. Don't sit there and write hypothetical problems and what the critical path may look like, that sort of thing. The real way to do it is collect as-built data, drop it in, and throw it into some analytical system to see what the impact was. And what happens when you do that, I can open this right up. Let's just go back into our scenario. I want to open this up, and I want to show you if that changed in our analysis. We see that it's been quantified. Now we want to see if it's highlighted in the analysis as a change issue that might have impacted the job. Had it not been there, we saw what the critical path was, but now we go back in and we see that this critical path has changed slightly from what it was. I'm going to get rid of this and just show you what it was and what it is now historically. And this is the power of our tool being able to do some of this. You see that critical path is a little disjointed here, but now we'll see that it's changed. And when I look at this fragnet, I'll see that, yeah, as a matter of fact, that fragnet, it was actually critical. If you put the as-built data in, you wire it in correctly, and then you go drop it in at the time, you'll see that it was delayed for a certain number of days. And this is the type of analysis that helps. This is the type of analysis that's usable. It's, you know, when people are dropping in data and changing things and dropping in long durations and going, look, it should have been critical. That's not as strong as what happens if I do a what if scenario, drop it into the data as is, put in the as-built, rerun it as if it happened in real time. And what does that mean? And this is, to me, and this is what we've seen, is how we get people on the same page of understanding. Other things that we've incorporated in here, and I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to get too far into it, but you're able to also, you know, change calendars. We're able to create rules that reject changes, like we saw all those changes that happened where all the durations were shortened. We can go back in there and say, you know what, on that schedule update that had all those shortened durations, I don't think that's going to happen. So let's go back and reject those changes. You can see these right here. We can actually go reject changes, create a rule and say, you know what, don't change those durations because we don't think that's going to happen. And what you'll end up seeing is the true schedule reflected after you change this. And what's the beauty of this is it's not altering the data. It's taking the data as is and it's letting you play around with it, really. And we don't allow you to change the original data. This original data, when you load these schedules, never gets changed. And that's really coming from our consulting background on the claims side. We always want to know what does the original data say, and we always want to be able to show, you know, what ifs. The other thing that we wanted to do here was track to a concrete completion milestone or track to, you know, the drywall completion milestone. You can go find those activities and you'll see right here that concrete's wrapping up. It's much further along. It is slightly delayed, but in the events that concrete claims come, we can open that up, we can look and we can see, you know, what extent did this impact cause to concrete or drywall, if any. You'll notice that, you know, quite often the critical path delays to the job don't actually impact all the trades consistently throughout. So their claims usually a little bit different. But anyway, all interesting stuff here. Wanted to touch base on that and let you know that, you know, we do want to help anywhere we can. We do have a tool that can help. We were also putting together this action plan that we believe will be useful in this time. And as a matter of fact, as part of our service, we want to offer a managed service to support you in setting up your schedules properly to get ready to go and manage and oversee this stuff. So for all new clients and all existing clients who are using SmartPM, we're going to offer a free managed service to start capturing and understanding impacts for the next, you know, foreseeable future, really. Our customer success team comes from industry. Our customer success team were the people who did this for a living. Now we have a tool that really helps, and now we want to help you. But regardless, I really appreciate the time. Kris, thank you so much for joining us today. And Rohit, thank you as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to send them my way or send them to reply to the email that we'll send out after this. We're going to get this video set up. We're going to send you the action plan, and hopefully everybody's doing well out there and managing through this process. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a little bit of a change, but I think with you know, tight controls, keeping an eye on schedule, taking it very seriously, it'll help everybody get through this process, and also a little bit of understanding that everybody's in a bit of a squeeze right now, not only business-wise, but life-wise, family-wise. Stresses are mounting, but let's all be cognizant of that, and let's try to help each other out. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you all have a good rest of the day, good weekend, and we start fresh next week.